Before school even began, I attended the Meet the Teacher night to introduce myself to the students that would be in my class this semester. Even though the event lasted 2 hours, students continued to trickle into the classroom the entire time, and I began to wonder the amount of students that would be in our class this year since it seemed like a never-ending stream of them. I checked the roster and saw that there were 26 students in the class, way larger than any of my classes in elementary school. I knew that this many students would provide a challenge to both my CT and I, but it also gave me a great opportunity to see firsthand how teachers operate when faced with difficulties such as these. The challenge of having a large number of students in class began on the first day of school. The students came into the class, chose their own seat since we had the option of flexible seating, and started on their morning work. However, arguments broke out on where each student wanted to sit if someone had taken their desired seat, and with a large class and not as many seating options, many students did not get what they wanted. A smaller class would still likely have arguments on where the students preferred to sit, but there would have been more seating options to please most every student. However, my CT resolved this issue and the morning proceeded with its routine. Another issue my CT and I faced head on the first week of school involved the students' iPads. 26 students in the class meant 26 iPads to set up and resulted in a loss of instructional time. Although the students were able to set up their iPads for the most part, they still struggled with logging into the apps they just downloaded. We as a class spent several hours trying to set up accounts and remedy any problems a student had with their iPad. Although painful, this time has paid off as students are able to work independently in the morning and throughout the day on their devices. However, that additional instructional time in the beginning of the year would have been nice to have from a teacher's perspective, as the class has fallen behind in the lessons and many plans have been pushed back to the next 9 weeks. A class this size challenges the teacher in each subject: science, social studies, ELA, and math. In regards to science and social studies, since these subjects are taught interchangeably throughout the year in my class, the teacher struggled to determine whether each student is paying attention during the lesson. On Thursdays and Fridays when I am present, I will sit at the back of the classroom during these lessons to ensure that the students who will remain at their desks rather than sit on the carpet are paying attention and copying down the notes. I have found many students who are in their own little world not listening to the teacher, and I have had to redirect their focus multiple times. I'm wondering though, when I am not in the class, how does my CT ensure that each student is paying attention and has the notes copied down while teaching at the same time? In a smaller class, the teacher could easily call all of the students to the carpet and monitor their notes. But not every student fits on the carpet at the front of the class in my room, which is why some choose to remain at their desks. I struggled with this aspect when teaching as well, because it was difficult to keep each student engaged and paying attention the entire time when they faced many distractions at their desks. I was able to maintain the focus of the group at the carpet, but the students who stayed at their desks didn't seem to be a part of the lesson. My teacher and I discussed on multiple occasions how to maintain the attention of every student, and we both agree that it is difficult with such a large class. Most students enjoy science and social studies because they are subjects where you can engage in hands-on learning or you talk about the events that occurred in the past, but still many students have other agendas when coming to school, and participating in learning is not one of them. The large class size posed an issue in ELA as well, not just in social studies and science. ELA spanned the whole 2 hours in my classroom because the students participated in reading and some form of writing each day. The writing portion of ELA consisted of students continuing to work on their writing pieces from the previous day. In my ELA methods class with Dr. Malloy, we talked about a writer's workshop that we could implement in our future classrooms. The writer's workshop, which should be used at least twice a week, consists of a mini lesson about a topic that students can use in their writing to improve their pieces, and then students receive 20 to 45 minutes writing their papers, depending on how long the mini lesson lasts. During this writing time, teachers are encouraged to hold conferences with their students about their writing, meeting with the entire class at least once a week. Then at the end of the workshop, the students can share their work with their peers in the author's chair at the front of the room. I asked my teacher about how she uses Writer's Workshop in her classroom, and she said that it was difficult to implement with such a large class, especially the writing conferences with each student during the week. Students have many questions about their writing, which I noticed as I would walk around the room during this time. So if my CT wanted to meet with each student for at least 5 minutes during this time, she would not be able to meet with the entire class in 1 week if she held conferences at least twice a week. I know my CT desires for my students to become better writers, which is why she uses Lucy Calkins for both reading and writing, but it is difficult for her to keep track of her students' writing process when there is such a large number of them. Furthermore, my teacher faces the same issue in the class's reading time. Students read independently for 45 minutes each day, and during this time, my CT likes to pull guided reading groups. First, it took us several weeks to place students in their guided reading groups at the beginning of the year, because each of the 26 students had to be tested through a reading record to find their level, so these groups were not formed, and guiding reading was not implemented until about halfway through the first quarter. I've taken many classes at Clemson that stress the importance of guided reading groups because they help students become better readers, but it was difficult to see these groups in action since my CT stopped meeting with these groups in the second quarter. Even if she continued with these groups, the students would not be able to meet with her as many times as she would have liked because of the limited amount of time and the varying reading levels that are present in the class. So we started meeting with each student independently, which worked better for the class as a whole. Since this 45 minutes of silent reading time was guaranteed every day, and each meeting took only about 5 minutes. Therefore, my CT and I could meet with each student over the course of each week to talk about their just right book that they were reading and answer any questions they might have had about their book. However, it is still a shame that I was unable to see these guided reading groups take place in my classroom for an extended period of time because I saw that these groups were a valuable way to improve a student's reading and had not much experience with this strategy yet. I believe math was the most challenging subject in trying to manage 26 students because it really separated the students in terms of levels. The administration told my CT to teach a lesson a day, so the students needed to master the concept in one day or they would begin to fall behind since most of the lessons built on one another. The high achievers received great grades on their exit tickets, which were worksheets that my CT and I used to gauge students' understanding of the lesson, whereas the majority of the class seemed to partially understand the concept but not in full. There were 4 students who were taken out of our class for extra help in math, so they would complete the exit ticket with the pull-out teacher. However, the students who remained in the class were on extremely different levels in math, so it was difficult to cater the lesson to each student. My CT and I tried to combat this issue by pulling math groups of students who performed poorly on their exit tickets in order to provide extra support to the students who needed to be taught the lesson again, but there were often so many that it was like we were teaching the lesson to the entire class again. It was hard to differentiate the learning. With so many students, it provides support to those who learn best with individualized attention. A smaller class, or even teaching one lesson every 2 days, would benefit the students so much more because the teacher could better differentiate the lesson to support the struggling learners while also catering to those who would understand the material. It was a hard situation to watch because the students who did not understand one lesson would continue with their downward spiral of not understanding any of the subsequent lessons. I could see my CT's heart in not wanting these students to fail, but there was not much she could do to help them besides provide them with extra help at the end of the day or give them homework for extra practice. I tried my best to tag team with her to support the slower learners, and I feel like this effort somewhat benefited the students because they were able to see another perspective on how to solve a problem. But I could only work with them twice a week, so the other 3 days they were really behind. About halfway through the year, a new student joined our class. The number of students had now risen to 27, and this student was failing every subject at her old school, making it even more difficult for my CT and I because another struggling learner had entered our classroom. She scored failing grades on her first several exit tickets in math, probably because this material and teaching style was new to her. And after her arrival, we implemented a catch-up day into our routine once a week. These catch-up days especially benefited the struggling learners because they were behind on much of their work. I was able to help these students while my CT entertained the students who were on track with an educational game. And if it weren't for these days, I don't think the struggling students would have ever been able to catch up. Thankfully, these catch-up days worked well with 2 teachers because the learning environment is still able to be maintained with one teacher working with the students who are behind and one teacher working with the students who are on track. However, it would be difficult to maintain the same environment with one teacher because their focus would have to be on one group over another. Overall, I did not realize the impact that a large number of students in one class could have on every subject. The size of this class challenged my thinking because I was forced to figure out creative ways to teach the material in which hopefully each student would be engaged and quickly think about how to gain every student's attention if they were not participating in the lesson I was teaching. This experience has caused me to think about the future and how I can potentially solve this challenge in my classroom if I am faced with teaching a large class. It would be easier to teach this number of students if they were all on the same level, but having students on varying learning levels in one class adds an extra element of difficulty. My mindset on teaching has truly been changed because it is not a job where you can come to school and breeze over every subject and expect each student to grasp the concept the first time you teach it. Teaching is a job where you have to monitor and adjust for every learning style, putting your students first always and doing everything in your power to help them learn the desired concept. It takes time and effort to help out each and every student, but this is a job we desire to do well because we care about the lives of our students, no matter how many are present in our classroom. I know there are many other challenges to teaching, but I feel more prepared to teach a large number of students based on my experience this semester. It will definitely take some thinking and creativity to teach a great number of students by myself in the future, but now that I have the foundation and understanding of how to respond to this challenge, I feel more confident in my ability to teach through different learning styles in a large class.